Some jobs require you to stay awake when the rest of the world sleeps, but not everything that lurks in the darkness is meant to be seen. Oh, one man working alone at 3 a.m. is about to encounter something he'll never forget. This is the story of a night shift worker who saw something he can't explain. A story you don't want to hear at 3 a.m. On night shifts, lonely, quiet, and uneventful. That's how Robert had always thought of them. A security guard for an old, nearly forgotten building in the city's outskirts, Robert was used to the silence. The dim glow of the flickering fluorescent lights overhead was his only companion during those long hours. But tonight would be different. Tonight, something would happen that would change him forever. It was the kind of night where the air felt thick, like something was watching. But Robert didn't notice, and at least not yet. It started, as most nights did, with routine checks. Floor by floor, room by room. Everything was as it should be. Empty desks, silent offices, the hum of electrical equipment in the distance. He'd done this 100 times. Nothing was out of place. But when he reached the third floor, something felt wrong. It was a subtle feeling at first, like a chill creeping up his spine, the kind of sensation that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching him. Brushing it off as paranoia, Robert continued his rounds. His footsteps echoed louder than usual in the empty hallway, almost as if the walls were listening. By the time the clock struck 3 a.m., that quiet dread had settled deep into Robert's chest. Something about this night felt different, heavier. He sat down at his security desk, staring at the multiple screens showing live footage from the building's security cameras. The monitors were dull, displaying the empty corridors and offices he'd just walked through. He leaned back in his chair, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. And then, on the monitor displaying the third-floor hallway, there it was. A flicker. Just for a second. He leaned closer, eyes narrowed. Did he imagine it? There! A movement in the corner of the screen, but when he blinked, the hallway was empty again. His pulse quickened. He replayed the footage, inching frame by frame, but whatever he thought he'd seen was gone. Robert shook his head. Maybe he was just tired. Long shifts can play tricks on the mind. But the feeling of being watched, that cold sensation creeping up his spine, was growing stronger. His instincts screamed at him. Something wasn't right. He scanned the monitors again, his eyes darting across the screens, and then on the third-floor feed he saw it. Someone was standing there, a figure barely visible in the dim light at the far end of the hallway. The air in the room seemed to drop in temperature. Robert's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the screen. The figure didn't move. It didn't walk or shift or approach. It just stood. And the longer Robert stared at it, the more uneasy he became. Something about the figure was wrong. It wasn't human, at least not entirely. His hand shook as he reached for the radio. But who would he call? The police? What could he even say? That there was a shadow standing in an empty building? No one would believe him. He had no choice but to investigate. But his footsteps echoed in the stairwell as he made his way up. Each step felt like it was pulling him deeper into something unknown, something he wasn't prepared to face. He reached the third floor, the door creaking open as he stepped into the hallway. It was empty, silent. But the feeling, the heavy, oppressive feeling, remained. Robert aimed his flashlight down the hall, towards the spot where the figure had stood. Nothing. His heart pounded in his chest as he approached. Closer, closer. But there was nothing there, just an empty hallway. He turned, slowly sweeping his flashlight across the corridor when he heard it. A whisper, low, almost like it was right next to him. But the hallway was empty. He spun around, heart racing. His flashlight beam flickered. Something was wrong. The air felt thick, suffocating, like he wasn't alone. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the whisper stopped. Silence fell over the hallway again, but Robert knew better. He wasn't alone. The building was watching. As he made his way back towards the security office, something caught his eye. A door, slightly ajar, at the far end of the hallway. That door had been locked earlier in the night. He was sure of it. His pulse quickened as he approached the door, flashlight trembling in his hand. The whisper returned, louder this time, coming from the darkness beyond the door. He hesitated, hand hovering over the door handle. Everything inside him screamed to turn around, to leave, to run. But he couldn't. Something was pulling him forward, something unseen, something dangerous. He pushed the door open, and the air beyond felt wrong, like the very atmosphere had changed. His flashlight flickered as it struggled to cut through the darkness. And then, in the shadows, he saw it. A figure hunched and twisted, its body unnatural, standing in the center of the room. Its back was to him, but he could feel its gaze, deep and hollow, boring into him. The whisper grew louder, its voice overlapping with itself, creating a maddening cacophony of sound. The figure turned slowly, its movements jerky and unnatural. Robert froze, his breath caught in his throat, as the figure faced him. But it had no face, just a void, black and endless, staring back at him. Robert couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His body was paralyzed by the sheer terror of what he was seeing. The whispering stopped, replaced by silence so deep it felt like the world had ceased to exist. And then, without warning, the figure lunged. Robert stumbled back, heart pounding in his chest, as the flashlight flickered out. Darkness swallowed him whole, and in that moment, he knew. He would never escape. Robert never made it out of the building that night. The police found his flashlight still flickering on the third-floor hallway. But Robert was never seen again. Some say the building holds secrets, dark ones, and that whatever lurks there at 3 a.m. is waiting for its next visitor. And that's the story of the night shift worker who saw something he can't explain at 3 a.m. The question is, would you dare work the night shift alone? But some people ignore the subscribe button. They think they'll be fine. But those are the ones who hear whispers in the dark, who feel cold fingers on their necks at 3 a.m. So go ahead, don't subscribe. But when the lights flicker tonight, don't say I didn't warn you. Sleep well, if you can.